So welcome to Skiff. We are, as you may know, a decentralized end-to-end encrypted privacy-first collaboration product. So if you use Signal Messenger or another privacy-focused messaging app, writing on our product or sharing or collaborating is just as private as sending a message on Signal. So we're excited to share a lot more about where our product comes from in the ideological sense, decentralization, Web 3.0, crypto, and also a little on the tech and why products like ours and this whole ecosystem are being built today. So thanks for coming, and should be a good time. Jason?
Yeah. I guess, so today we're going to be covering a lot of topics, but what we really want to cover most is what we see as a pivotal transformation in how people are using and interacting with the web, sort of how we think about a lot of different things, whether that's this shift to decentralization or, of course, our main thing, which is privacy. We'll end this conversation by focusing on a specific application, which is real-time collaboration, where we have some interesting thoughts on how to approach that. And then we'll open up it to the discussion. So really up to everyone here to ask questions and lead the discussion in whatever direction you want.
Well, for a brief intro, I'm Andrew. We also have Jason on the call. We're both the founders of Skiff. And, just want to say thank you to our supporters financially and, in time, from Trail of Bits, Signal Messenger, New York Times, Stanford, Stellar, the cryptocurrency, and from Sequoia. So thank you all. And, hopefully you know a bit about the product too. So Jason, you want to start our history lesson?
I'll make it a very brief history lesson, which is the entire history of the web in 3 bullet points. We hear Web 3.0, and that's kind of a buzzword. Actually, Web 3.0 existed before it became associated with decentralization, mainly because Web 2.0 was a thing. And so it was like a placeholder for a while, but it all kind of starts with the beginnings of the internet, which were actually decentralized from the very start. And the reason the internet started off to be decentralized was actually the Cold War. This is like the late 60s, 70s. And the US government was really worried about their nuclear arsenal getting taken down by one centralized server being compromised. And so they wanted to look into ways of basically having many nodes that could sort of communicate among each other. And that was actually the sort of genesis of ARPANET. And so when we think about Web 1.0, this is really the early days of the web in terms of creating open source protocols. Think HTTP, DNS, email, SMTP, FTP, like stateless, open source, really ways of allowing people to interoperate through protocols. And that's really the early web days. The next stage, this is really like late 90s through today, and that's the commercialization of the web. Web 2.0 is really defined by large mega companies building these scalable, massive platforms. And the real change there from Web 1.0 has been this delegation of control to providers. So rather than sort of spinning up your own email server, people now just trust Google to handle their mail through Gmail, or the equivalents for IRC would be Slack or Dropbox for files and things like that. And so what we see today is a lot of platforms that rely a lot on data and creating networks and having almost sort of walled gardens that don't communicate among each other. But we do that for the sake of usability. And so Web 3.0, which is why you're here today, is really about re-decentralizing the web. It's about thinking of ways to create new protocols that are updated for modern applications that give value and control back to the user, that take away trust from fully being on the provider and making it something that you verify cryptographically, and making sure that people are able to sort of share in the rewards through proper incentivization, which also allows people to sort of participate properly and sort of abide by the rules. And so another way to look at this is the second stage, Web 2.0. It's like, why did we make this switch from decentralized to centralized to begin with? And it really boils down to the fact that decentralized systems are very hard to maintain and update. You need everyone to sort of agree to changes. And that makes it super hard to do things that are almost required for building up a large platform. It's not easy to deploy changes. You can't incorporate feedback. Products can become outdated, and ultimately you get a lot of fragmentation and things that aren't super usable. Just as an example, it took 24 years for that update to be made to kind of become the norm on the internet. It's just really hard. Centralization has been greatly beneficial to improving access to the internet by catalyzing usability. There's a lot of reasons why the world has changed.
Absolutely. So to share a bit about why Web 3.0, honestly, it kind of is a very logical extension of all the things Jason talked about, where we're moving from a model where people are centralizing services, trusting platforms like Slack or Google with their data, to something where, in basically every category, from data ownership to access from different users to the trust model of the organization and how you interact with it, are basically just better, or at least in our opinions better. If you disagree, please enter the chat and let us know. But what we mean by that is often, a Web 3.0 decentralized system has a lot more freedom around how users can access it, a lot harder for a single provider to just, stop someone from using a product or a platform. We've seen examples of this where some researchers and journalists using Google products have had, random terms of service violations from probably some machine learning model flagged, and then all of a sudden their work is inaccessible. And so in a Web 3.0 model, we get rid of that deep reliance on Google or whatever provider is creating a service like that, and however they end up regulating their services. And so there are still models where networks and decentralized systems have ways of preventing kind of malicious use and bad actors from using their services, but it's a lot more transparent, open source, et cetera. The other is data ownership. And so a lot of the platforms that we put on a couple slides back on the blockchain, distributed file storage, et cetera, let people actually have much more control over their own data. So storing your files all around the world in a collection of nodes instead of in a single company's servers, or in the company's servers that they've delegated to another company. And really Web 3.0 decentralization are letting us do that sort of stuff. The other awesome part of this is trust, where a lot of decentralized systems have built models where either kind of certain designated nodes are entrusted with authority to make decisions for a network or a group of individuals. So there are some blockchain platforms like Ripple that have been really proactive in building systems like that, and others where a majority or a certain collection of users can make decisions about how everyone's data is stored or how the network moves forward, like a typical Bitcoin blockchain. So the last is that we can also incentivize users to participate in this, in these services and in these markets more. One of the best examples here would be IPFS, or the Interplanetary File System, which also has created a service called Filecoin, wherein individual miners of Filecoin can essentially put storage onto the interplanetary file system that everyone can use to kind of store their data decentralized around the world, and also earn incentives for participating. A data ownership point, Web 3.0 is a natural evolution of trusting a single company, and also pretty opaque services.
Kind of brought up these two really interesting models, right? There were benefits to Web 2.0 that definitely facilitated the growth of the internet, but like Andrew just mentioned, lots of reasons why people are ready to make changes. But we still are left trying to reconcile these two things, because decentralization is definitely not a panacea to every issue. Problems with updating and improving it still kind of persist. And when it comes to privacy and encryption, it doesn't necessarily make any promises. Not to say that you can't have both, it's just, the two are not the same. And so we're definitely thinking about ways in which we can leverage the best of both of these. At Skiff, we're thinking about how do we, follow a directive that is to build privacy and decentralization, because ignoring the technologies, the values really do go hand in hand. The case in point for how we can have both is with collaboration.
So collaboration on Skiff, as Jason said, is designed to be both decentralized, where we give our users more control and ownership over their data, and also absolutely private, where there's no need for us to all believe in a centralized provider having access to all the things that we write and we share. So to go into the deep tech here, and if you have questions or it would be helpful to slow down, just let me know in the chat. We'll start at the Web 2.0 model, which is how most collaboration platforms like Google Docs have worked for the last decade or so, where basically if we have two users, Alice and Bob, sending two different operations, like typing the letter A and typing the letter B, we have this central provider, a very Web 2.0 thing, transforming them and saying, this is the new version of the document, where there's an A here and a B here. So Alice and Bob really have no control over what happens. They can both type an A and a B at the exact same time, and we'll leave it up to the centralized provider to figure out what happens. So let me go to the next slide. that's basically how a lot of platforms work today, where you send your kind of operation to the central provider, and then it spits out a new document that gets repropagated to Alice and to Bob. The new model is called a CRDT, which is a conflict-free replicated data type. And so effectively, let's just look back at the previous slide. Imagine just slicing out this middle piece of a server, where now Alice and Bob typing A and typing B just send the changes directly to each other. So Alice types an A, sends it to Bob. Bob types a B and sends that to Alice. And now instead of having the central provider figure out what comes next, we let Alice and Bob at the same time figure out how that document should change. And that sounds really weird. Like, are we going to see an AB on Alice's side and a BA on Bob's side? Well, the magic of CRDTs is that every single operation, like typing a key or deleting a letter, has a certain version or timestamp or basically number associated with it. So Alice will type an A and then say, Alice typed the letter A onto document version 0. And Bob will type the letter B and say, I typed a B on version 0. And at this place in that time. And so then what both of them do is they take each other's changes and they play them back depending on the order that they were performed. And so then Bob knows what version 0 was, Alice knows what version 0 was, and then they can both independently perform these operations on their kind of own copies of the document and end up at the resolved document that they both see in their browsers. So that's a bit of a mouthful. Basically, in the old model, we'll let Google or whatever server is in the middle figure out how the document should be resolved in the end. In the new model, we'll say everyone starts with the same version and then applies the same operations independently. And so they can do that all across the world, applying the A and the B themselves, and then figure out through an algorithm how the document should look. Now, we'll ratchet up the craziness one final level, which is Skiff's model, where all of this is end-to-end encrypted. So instead of just doing the model where Alice sends a letter to Bob and Bob sends a letter to Alice, we'll now end-to-end encrypt that. And so that means basically when Alice types an A, it's like sending a signal message to Bob, where no one in between can ever decrypt, edit, see, or modify that edit made by Alice. And Bob does the same with all the edits that they're making in their browser. And so we end-to-end encrypt all the messages going back and forth, and then end up at a resolved document.
Yeah, and Andrew, there's the question, which is why would you need to put that server in there? Why not just do the regular old CRDT? What's the benefit to having that?
Oh, that's a really good question. And then I see another question in the chat too that I'll answer in a sec. So the question on why would we ever have a server? The technology didn't really exist 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So the way Google was doing it was the first generation of real-time collaboration on the internet, where it had existed in like Xerox research labs and in universities for like 20 years. Google took that technology and built it into Google Drive. And then today we've seen at the same time, this new model of CRDTs just become practical. And so I wish I had it, I could put it in the chat, but the creator of Google's model, he wrote a blog post talking about CRDTs and saying, this is maybe a few months ago, saying that CRDTs are finally good enough to be used in products as a replacement for operational transforms. And also noting that they give people more ownership over their data, they're decentralized, and you can do things like end-to-end encryption. So it's a great question. I wish it were always this way, but we're just starting to see the technology be good enough. And that's a big reason why we want to build these products at Skiff. One more question in the chat. If Bob changes their local timestamp to say 1970, would their changes always show first? That is a great question. So in some versions of CRDTs, if I were at home writing a CRDT late at night, maybe I would use just timestamps to figure out how documents worked. But like you're saying, that could mess, if everyone doesn't have an exact clock or they mess with their machine's clock, it could totally change behavior. So a lot of CRDTs, some use timestamps, some also use document versions as like their clock. So in this version, we would say Alice applied edit A to version 0 or 0.1, and Bob applied edit B to version 0.1 at this position. And then, there's a conflict resolution algorithm, which looks at both their versions and resolves them. And, there are methods for breaking ties if they're like at the exact same time on the exact same version in the exact same position. But beyond that, we can largely use versions instead of time. Great questions. Jason, I see one more message in the chat.
In the small chat, so Rhythm asks, do you do any kind of privacy preserving computation on the encrypted data on your server to get value out of it?
That's a good question. No, it's really just a random hex string. So if you see these, random letters in the diagram that we made, that Jason made, there's really nothing we can kind of compute out of that. It's just completely private. Frankly, if you were trying to do some analytics, you could probably look at the number of operations per amount of time. So, maybe it would tell you if people are typing really fast or they're typing really slow. But a lot of those messages are really just sent from peer to peer. And so there's no need for Skiff or anyone in between to get involved. And so that's the beauty of one, end-to-end encryption, and two, Web 3.0, where we took out the server from Google and we can both end-to-end encrypt and connect peer-to-peer. Happy to elaborate more if there are any other questions on that. It's a great question. Cool.
Yeah. And I guess this is just to show what it looks like in case you're looking to visualize it. The benefits of this is that we can make it look nice and update the editor and add all the features and requests that people are sending us all day and night on Skiff. So, it's really the best of both worlds for us.
Totally. I see one more question in the chat on bad actors. Would the server be tasked with identifying bad actors or content not allowed, or at any point this content goes? That's a great question. So frankly, making sure that malicious content or content that violates our acceptable use policy, we are, very proactive in making sure that that type of stuff isn't on our platform. An example would be, someone putting large numbers of credit cards and sending them around. A lot of that is done through reporting systems and other research that's been developed for like wide scale end-to-end encrypted platforms. So, Signal with 200 million users and WhatsApp with 2 billion, all building in end-to-end encryption, have built out some really great privacy preserving methods to, let users kind of proactively flag bad content and also, make sure platforms are doing the right things around, setting technical limits for how people can share and send things. So that's, the end of the, I guess, educational period of the webinar. I know we've already started some questions, so if people want to put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat, we'll happily talk through anything, on the technical side, on how, CRDTs work, on how end-to-end encryption works. Jason can tell you more of Web 3.0 history. And if you have questions tomorrow or you wake up at night thinking about Web 3.0, please feel free to email us to hello@skiff.org. See, another question. So Skiff Sheets and Forms. We are hard at work. We've been working actually on a prototype of the Sheets product. We'll be revamping all of the in-document tables coming soon. So maybe we'll put a sneak peek of that on our Twitter or on our website. Very excited about that. Forms are really interesting. They're a really natural case for end-to-end encryption, because if anyone has used, PGP or encryption keys before, you can give out a public key and let people send you data totally privately. And so, forms fit really nicely into our white paper and our technical model, but we have not built it yet. We are, we're a small team with a lot to do, and we're very excited about privacy. So we're thinking about it. Well, I see one more question. Is this primarily targeted as a consumer offering? Do you plan to provide a business enterprise solution? That's a great question. So today we have both. We have mostly consumers finding and using our product to collaborate, share, and work together privately and securely. We also have some organizations that have adopted Skiff for all sorts of reasons, from doing research to writing notes to sharing the product. And so, we're building more of a structured enterprise offering that'll have, a lot of the traditional enterprise tools like, really great import and export of files. But right now we are, let's say a consumer and teams product mostly. And yes, our product will be on skiff.org/webinars soon, or webinar. And
webinars, yeah.
Couple more questions in the chat. So we have a question on Web 1.0 to 2.0 spread through all kinds of services. Do we see Web 2.0 to 3.0 as equally comprehensive, or is it a subset? That is a really great question. So I would say, frankly, yes, we're seeing it today. We're seeing it, a lot with like decentralized finance and that evolving into all sorts of crazy things. That's been a decades-long change, and we're seeing that even more. And now with decentralized file systems and our product, we're seeing it in evolve even more. But Jason, you probably have the best.
Yeah, I mean, I can't predict the future here, but I think what's interesting too about whether it's privacy products or decentralization, it's something that you see these large companies not really having the capability of switching over to. It's just, it's like an Achilles heel for them because you really have to build things like this from the start. It's not something you can update to or incorporate really easily into an existing platform. And so I think you start to see new services that are working with this model just because it's a better way to design products, honestly. Over time, the web will shift over and there's going to be hopefully, a rebalancing that benefits, everyone.
Yeah, totally agree. And one more question on, actually two more. One on the ideological motivations for Skiff. Can we say more on that? Of course. Well, I think a lot of, I'm going to go back a few slides. But a lot of the benefits of Web 3.0 are greater data ownership from users, less kind of trust in a single provider and a single service to create products. And I think, our team, we believe in that because it lets people work more privately. It means we don't have to worry about, really opaque big tech companies and what they do with our data. And, we want to live in a world where all the products that are, built to be privacy first and secure are the best products out there. And so if I could offer you a product that is more private, that you can trust in its transparency and its data model, or one that's opaque where you have to worry about where your data is going, I'm positive, and we're seeing this today, hundreds of millions of people to more choosing that more private version. It's really exciting to live in the world right now. And Jason, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess, a big thing for all of our engineers on our team is that, we love building technology, but not just building it for the sake of building it, but thinking deeply about, how it fits into the wider world. And there's just so much like of the Web 3.0, like its history, like it's not on its own. It's part of society. It's part of what's going on. Personally, like, Andrew's traveled the world and has faced, sort of the security threats you can, really tangibly feel. I have a family background that's dealt with this living under a dictatorship. Like we deeply understand that there's more to it than just, building and engineering things. So, there's a strong drive in why we think it's important to build products like this.
Totally. Last question on, actually two more. So one on software version control. Oh, wow. Yeah, we've got to build end-to-end encrypted, Git. It's something that's really interesting. Software is like really important intellectual property, and it's something we're excited about. We do have a lot on our plate, so focusing on the consumer side. And then one more question on the enterprise offerings. Actually, two more quick ones. Can we provide a content privacy policy for your organization, but have visibility that's content related to your company? That's definitely something that works well with the Skiff model, in that, Skiff is built to be decentralized and private, but that also means, we can treat organizations as users themselves, where they can set policies for the documents that belong to them. And so that model works really well with organizations. It means you get the same properties of trust and privacy and transparency, in using Skiff, but we can also, actually in development are all the typical, policies enterprise users may want to set on privacy and retention and all that stuff. Last question on when can I get access? Please email I guess, support. So we have a lot of emails, but email support@skiff.org. I'll put it in the chat. And we'll get you on this week as we onboard a new cohort of people. Well, I think we're also at half an hour. Thank you all so much for coming. This will be put on the internet and for viewing later. And I've got one more question on decentralized docs. I'll just say a quick thank you. Thank you to everyone. Hope you learned a lot about Skiff and why we're excited about it. And on decentralized documents, do we use IPFS for storing files? We spoke a lot about IPFS. I've been building in that community for a while. We currently, documents are decentralized when they're being collaborated on and then stored, with multiple backups in, end-to-end encrypted in cloud providers in between. We are working on a model where users can also delegate to store their files in IPFS for that long-term storage. So that's all in progress. Cool. Well, thank you all again. Really appreciate everyone's time and stay in touch. And we hope we inspired you to be excited about Web 3.0.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Take care.